You know, every empire, every government, they all swear their money is safe. They insist their promises will last forever. But every single time, history proves them wrong. So the real question isn't if financial systems fail, it's what actually survives when they do. And the answer? Well, it might surprise you.
Now, I know that sounds incredibly dramatic, but it's not just a clever line. It's the central, kind of brutal lesson from all of history. See, we're all taught to see our financial systems as this permanent, solid bedrock. But the actual historical record? It tells a totally different story. Stability is the exception. Collapse is the predictable, recurring norm.
So, to really get why things collapse, we have to start with the basics. What even is money? It's not the paper, it's not the metal, it's just a collective agreement, a system of trust. And probably the most dangerous financial mistake anyone can make is forgetting that trust can, and often does, just vanish in an instant.
So on one hand, you have the grand illusion we all like to live in, that our money is a bedrock, that our savings are totally safe. It feels good, right? It's comforting. But on the other hand, you have the harsh reality taught by centuries of failure. Money is just a promise, and that promise has been broken over and over and over again. So how does that trust just evaporate? Well, let's dive into the first major pattern, what you could call the printing press temptation. This is the classic story of how rulers and governments, when they're backed into a corner, become the architects of their own currency's destruction. This right here is the textbook path to ruin. It all starts with a currency everyone trusts, like the Byzantine gold solidus. For centuries, this thing was like the US dollar of its day. But then, the temptation. Emperors got squeezed for cash, so they started secretly mixing in cheaper metals, debasement. For a little while, nobody noticed. But eventually, the market figured out the scam and trust just shattered. The coin that built an empire became totally worthless. So here's the crucial part. What did people do when they realized the government was cheating them? They didn't just sit there and take it. They acted. They fled. They dumped the bad money and ran to assets the government couldn't fake. Things like pure, unadulterated gold and tangible stuff like land. That is the first timeless lesson of financial survival. Now let's jump forward about 1,000 years to a place you might not expect to see this pattern repeat, the United States. During the Civil War, the Confederacy was desperate for resources, so they just printed their currency, the grayback, into oblivion. The result? An inflation rate of around 9,000%. A soldier's entire paycheck became worthless before he even had a chance to spend it. And this wasn't some kind of fluke. The parallels across history are just striking. You look at revolutionary France in the 1790s, the Confederacy in the 1860s, different continents, different decades, but the exact same playbook. A government in crisis prints a ton of money backed by nothing more than a promise. And the result? It's always the same. Hyperinflation, economic ruin, and ordinary people's life savings completely wiped out. But it's not always governments that do the breaking. Sometimes, the system breaks from the outside in. We're talking about sudden external shocks, a pandemic, a war. These things don't necessarily cause the weakness, but they are fantastic at revealing the fragility that was hiding there all along.
Just look at this timeline. The Black Death, the Asian financial crisis, the 2008 meltdown, the COVID pandemic. They're centuries apart, but they all share one critical feature. Every single one of them triggered a massive wealth transfer. The people living paycheck to paycheck, who trusted the system, they got hammered. But the people with reserves, with cash on the sidelines, they were rewarded, scooping up assets for pennies on the dollar. Crises always reward the prepared.
And this quote, man, it just perfectly captures another illusion, the idea that our biggest institutions are somehow safe. Back in 14th century Florence, the biggest banks in the world, Bardi and Peruzzi, went under when a king defaulted on his loans. Sound familiar? It's the exact same story as Lehman Brothers in 2008. Being big and famous is not protection. And if you think this is all just ancient history, you have to look at what's been happening in Lebanon since 2019. This isn't a history book, this is right now. The banks didn't just stumble, they literally locked their doors. People's digital bank balances, their life savings, were frozen and then basically erased. It's a brutal, modern lesson. Your money in the bank isn't really yours. It's a loan to the bank that they might just decide not to pay back.
All right, so we've seen how these systems break. It's not exactly cheerful stuff. So what's the answer? What do the survivors do? What's the timeless playbook for protecting yourself when all these illusions of safety just crumble?
This table makes the whole pattern crystal clear. Just look at the what failed column.
Debased coins, paper currency, digital numbers on a screen. They're all just promises. They're abstract. Now look at the what survived column. Pure gold, land, food, physical goods. It's all real stuff. That is the fundamental divide between what evaporates and what actually endures. And this leads us to a really stark paradox. For most people, a financial collapse is an absolute tragedy. It's ruin. But for the very few who are prepared, the ones with real assets and cash, it becomes the single greatest opportunity of their lives to build wealth, because they can buy what everyone else is being forced to sell.
So yeah, we focused a lot on tangible things: gold, land, property. But there is another class of asset out there that's just as durable, and maybe even more valuable, because nobody can seize it and you can't inflate it away.
And here it is, real skills. I mean, think about it. When the currency is worthless and the global supply chains are broken, the ability to produce things becomes everything. A baker who can make bread, a mechanic who can fix a generator, a farmer who can grow food. These people can create real value. In a crisis, people who can actually make and do useful things, they don't just survive, they rise to the top. So let's just boil it all down. This is the core truth. Every single financial crisis, from ancient Rome to whatever's in tomorrow's headlines, is a transfer of wealth. It's that simple. It moves from the masses who put their blind faith in promises and fragile systems to the few who understood the risks and held on to something real. And that leaves us with one final, crucial question. One you have to ask yourself. When the next storm hits, and history pretty much guarantees that it will, what are you going to be holding? Will it be a handful of abstract promises on paper and on screens, or will it be something real,